uniform, or when we broke out the fancy Western clothes permitted for events like weddings or birthday parties. Beyond this, we were supposed to conduct ourselves with modesty in all aspects of our lives. We weren't allowed to have sleepovers or hangouts with friends outside of school, and we weren't allowed to date. Of course, this was no problem for much of my adolescence because I didn't like girls. Actually, not being able to date was a blessing at the time, as it made it easy to cover up the fact that I wasn't into girls. I just couldn't date. I'm single because I'm not allowed to date and not because I don't fancy girls, so that's that. Nothing to see here, folks. There were 5 of us. I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and I was the baby. Out of all of my siblings, I was always the surest of myself. My parents worked a lot, and so when they weren't around, I watched a lot of TV, which was not permitted, like Melrose Place, Beverly Hills 90210, and ER, all of which had much more mature subject matter than a child should be watching. They dealt with subject matters like sex and drug use, which my parents would have been completely shocked to discover I understood, never mind that I was learning about these things from TV. These topics were never discussed in our culture. Because I watched so many shows, I became weirdly worldly wise. My vocabulary was different. I knew things even my oldest siblings didn't know. I was definitely the cockiest one of the family. I would correct other people's spelling and grammar and the way they'd speak. I was the obnoxious sibling. I was a nightmare. It was clear from an early age that I was different, and I had a particular affinity for personal style. Growing up, my favorite movie was Dirty Dancing, which no other 8-year-old boy was obsessed with. Their loss, that movie is still incredible and holds up like no other. I also had lots of Barbie dolls, but no one outside the house knew about that, which is probably a good thing, as my school was definitely not ready for that in the 1990s. Weirdly, my dad got them for me. I know that sounds insane, but here goes. My dad and his brother were super close, but strangely competitive. They each had children of similar ages, and the cousin closest to my age was female. She and I were in the same classes throughout school, and we were encouraged to compete with each other when it came to our grades and exams. That competition spilled over into gift-giving from our parents. When my dad learned that my cousin had been given a Barbie house and a Barbie doll, the following week I had a bigger Barbie house with 5 or 6 Barbie dolls. I also had 2 Ken dolls, one black and one white, and a black doll called Cindy, who was a popular UK Barbie knockoff. No one saw this as peculiar, which, looking back, just shows how oblivious we all were to Western culture and how that would have been considered out of the norm for most sons to receive. I, however, was over the freaking moon. It felt like all of my Christmases had come at once. I wondered when my dad would realize that playing with Barbies wasn't what he might have wanted for me, so I always did it in secret. I pretended to be totally unfazed about the Barbies when anyone was around, but as soon as the coast was clear, I would run up to my bedroom and play house with my new favorite toys. It was a really happy time. When I wasn't at home, I remember hating school. I found it boring and I had no desire to learn. I liked the social aspect. I wasn't popular and I didn't have a crew, but I had friends. I had a couple of close male friends, one South Asian and one white, and a really close South Asian female friend. It was pretty easy to make South Asian friends, as there were so few of us that we banded together. Strength in numbers kind of shit, because you knew you needed those numbers outside of school in case it was one of those special days when the racist bullies were outside the school grounds waiting for the next attack. Luckily, I always had someone to sit with or talk to. I felt like I was part of something and I wasn't concerned about dating or the future. I was fun and funny and I could make people laugh in class. I think I was liked enough during school hours and no one at school ever caused me any issues. Even though I hated academia, I did well in class. I was a solid A-B student. I did no homework, I did only the minimum required to get through, but it always worked. I remember lording it over my siblings that they had to work so hard for grades. I really was a nightmare with my sibs. And I was able to do it all without revision, our word for studying. I didn't have to revise. I could just watch TV instead and then take the exam and do very well. Outside of school, I didn't have much of a chance to have a social life, as it's not considered appropriate for South Asian boys and girls to mix freely. Even if I had a group of all-male friends, they couldn't come over because I had sisters. At the time, I thought that was so lame and I was so annoyed at my parents for it, but now I see it's just smart, man. As an adult,